Welcome everyone to Brady Ware's virtual annual dealership conference. Many of you on the call have been with us in person. The last few years we've done this conference, and this year there's a lot going on. It's been an unusual year, and we figured we'll put a virtual one on this year, be in accordance with some safeguards and still share some good information. I want to thank Bolivia Blatt for being a co-sponsor with us on this. Our friends over there, Kevin Timison and Ken Bolivia, good people we work with usually, and happy to have them be a sponsor with us for this year. This year, we got Rhett Ricart, who's the chairman of NADA, who's got his hands, who's gonna give us some really good information on the industry. It's been an unusual year. Rhett's seen he's got his pulse on this industry and probably dealing with a lot of things. So I'm really interested on what he has to say and what he's seen and some of his thoughts for the future. Little housekeeping before I turn it over to Rhett. Everyone is muted, so put your questions in the Q&A box. We're gonna have a live Q&A session afterwards, so make sure Rhett likes questions. So let's make sure we use that. And I guess with that, I'll turn it over to Rhett. Thank you, Rhett.
Thank you, Sam. I want to thank Brady Ware for having me today. Once again, I'd like to reiterate the fact that I love questions. I like a lot of questions because, as you know, there's a plethora of issues that are going on right now, and for me to be able to address those in just a simple talk with you doesn't get it done. This has been the most unpredictable year of our lives. I know it has been for me. When I became chairman of the NADA back in February, I was on stage and I talked about the corruption, obstruction, and disruption. And I got to tell you, we've seen the disruption like we've never seen before in any sector, in any business, at any time. So for the auto industry, briefly, I mean, we're in that pandemic. We just had a little relapse. There's been layoffs, massive layoffs, and I just don't want to say this from a dealer's perspective because look at the manufacturers too. Those have been affected. There's been factory shutdowns, dealerships have been shut down. There's been loss of new car inventory. We've had a roller coaster used car market, and I'm sure a lot of your dealer clients have called you with frustration and trying to figure that one out. We've had a contentious presidential election and even widespread protests all across the country. But I'm here with you today, and I have to commend the automotive industry that I'm part of because we've been the most resilient of anything. Next time you drive home and you pass restaurants and small businesses on the way, you're going to notice a lot of them are boarded up and shut down and they're not operating, but automobile dealerships across the country are still working. We have resilient men and women. Dealers, even our employees, are still standing tall and stronger than ever. There's been some sectors in the United States that have been shut down that haven't done so well. There have been some other sectors that have done very well in retail. Dealership doors are open. Customers are safely back shopping. They're enjoying, the shopping experience again. And our employees are working and providing for their families, and you couldn't ask for anything more than that. Being in a good place today doesn't mean it came easy, and it means we put a lot of hard work into day one of the pandemic at the NADA. Well, business after business has been shutting down. Our employees have been furloughed and laid off by the thousands across the country. Dealers are hiring them back, and so is the manufacturers. The NADA was one of the very first associations to get to the White House. I can tell you that because part of our legislative and our regulatory staff, I mean, we stormed the White House on this one because we had to advocate for the automobile industry. And as you know, the strength of an association lies in its ability to advocate for its dealers. And the NADA has been doing it for over 100 years, Republican and Democrat, doesn't make any difference. We work both sides of the aisles to make sure the automotive industry remains protected and strong. Even in the beginning, back in March, when that COVID hit, we showed why dealerships were essential. And I know many of your dealers across the country were scared to death. If they weren't scared, there's someone I haven't met yet. But through the hard work of the NADA and our state associations across the country, we kept our service centers open. In many cases, our sales were deemed essential. and dealers sold cars, but we had to learn to sell them online in many cases. And we showed the legislators and regulators why people need their cars, especially essential workers. You got to think about that. You know, we have police and we have nurses and doctors. They had to get to work, you know. Even when sales slowed in the earlier half of this year, we worked with what we had, and dealers certainly work closely with the financial advisors and yourself, you know, accountants, especially in light of the year's tax changes and the numerous deadlines associated with the Paycheck Protection Program. I'll never forget, it was a Saturday, Sunday, Monday, we were talking with Mitch McConnell to try to get this legislation on the Paycheck Protection Program, and they were going to limit it to 200 employees through the SBA. The NADA thought it was important that a lot of dealers have a lot more than 200 employees. We also took a look at the fact that we ended up at 500. And I'll never forget Mitch telling us that he's saying, hey, boys, this is the first inning of a 9-inning ball game. And man, was he right, you know. But we were able to get those franchise identification codes through the NADA. We worked with the manufacturers directly that whole 3-4 days. To get, many of them didn't have them. They didn't have a franchise identification code to even do an SBA loan. But it's been a lifesaver for many of our businesses. It provided liquidity for dealers and let them go to sleep at night. In fact, the NADA, we assisted these auto manufacturers for these FIC numbers, and they had no idea how to do it until we came along. So dealers across the United States were the first in line for these loans when they were made. We understand today we are operating in a new business environment. You know, everybody is. I'm sure you are too at home. What does that mean? Well, the COVID has changed the norms and behavior in many ways. But there's some interesting consumer trends that have emerged. You know, first of all, people are finding comfort in their car ownership. As I like to say, the two safest places during a COVID pandemic is either in your own family room or your own car. And consumers have figured that out. People also expect, you know, to find some products and get a deal. But as you know, there's been shortage of products, whether it's a bicycle or a boat or a jet ski. There's been shortages because all these factories have been shut down. People want the dealer experience closer to home. You know, people want to have somebody they can get to and take care of them. And people are going online. People are going online like never before. And they're accepting at-home delivery, where before it was maybe an exception. I think we'll see in the next few years it's going to be the rule. You know, and that's one of the earlier shifts in which Americans shopped. You know, with switching to buying products online rather than in stores. This has been going on for years. You know, we've been an AutoFi dealer at our dealerships for years, and I know many other dealers across the country have their own online. But the pandemic didn't accelerate it; it put it into hyperspeed. You know, this digital thing is the real deal. Google research has showed that 1 in 5 shoppers said they'd purchase a car right now if given an online option, and 68% of the customers now believe that digital experience is a good alternative to visiting a dealership. The good news is the U.S. continues to add back jobs. You know, bad news, the rate of growth is still slowing. But, you know, I'm not done talking about that digital environment because, quite frankly, you know, I take a look at dealers across the country, and a third of our dealers across the country only sell 300 new cars or less every year. So for them to be able to have the tools and the education to be able to keep up to speed with, let's say, the bigger dealers, it's more expensive. It's more time consuming. That's the reason the NADA, not only did we put hyperspeed into our legislative efforts and regulatory efforts, we put it into our educational efforts by offering many of our classes for our dealers digitally, just like we are today, virtually, to be able to learn these best practices when it comes to it. So best, I noticed one of your banners behind me here mentioned digital marketing. I got to tell you, it's never before have we seen any type of a digital online acceleration like we have currently. But dealers have, quite frankly, adapted quite well. Last year, there was over 39 million used cars sold. And the year before, just about that many, about 600,000 less. But out of the 600,000 used cars retailed last year, the increase, new car dealers were responsible for 500,000 of this 600,000. That tells you something. It's not Carvana, it's not the rest of them. It's the dealers that are adapting and they're making those adjustments. But let me talk about employment. You know, the employment rate fell partially from workers returning to work, but also because of the discouraged workers leaving their labor force and no longer actively searching for employment. The beginning of October, there were 8.3 million more unemployed workers than there were job openings. And what we've seen from COVID-19, it has hit the lower earning workers much harder than the higher earning workers. According to a Washington Post analysis, Washington lower wage jobs were lost at 8 times the rate of higher rate jobs, 8 times faster. And the unemployment rate for low wage workers was still down more than 20%. And this was just as recently as about 60 days ago. But let me talk about something I really know something about, and that's employment at franchise automobile dealerships. It's improved month after month. Currently, dealers employ more than 1 million people, about 1,048,000, I think to be exact. Before the COVID recession, franchise dealerships employed about 1.1 million, so it's just a scat underneath that. We expect to continue to see job gains at dealerships, but at a declining pace for the rest of the year. But if you talk about employment, you got to talk about our vehicle production problem we have. North American production for 2020 is now on track to total about 13.4 million vehicles. Sales bounced back from the pandemic in the second quarter. Overall demand remains well below pre-crisis levels, but manufacturers are not necessarily eager to rebuild a bunch of new cars and stock them all up, or have to increase their C&I to be able to move them. There's been some sluggishness coming out of the last quarter's industry-wide shutdowns. This includes concerns related to safety and health issues raised by the virus. Think about these manufacturers have to abide by these virus protocols, but also their suppliers. You know, these parts suppliers that supply the parts for just-in-time delivery, they have to abide by this. And if you have a small parts supplier that's maybe making a clip for a window and they happen to have a COVID breakout within their company, small company, they shut down the whole assembly line until that new part gets there. That's a huge concern for the manufacturer. So they learn logistically, they have to have a plan A, a plan B, a plan C, probably a D, E, F, and G when it comes to part supplying. However, considered all these things, production is relatively strong. You know, it's amazing, our manufacturing process, and it's going to remain strong through the rest of the year. Because of that, the NADA has raised its light vehicle sales forecast to 14.1 million units for the year for 2020. Last month, it came in about 16 million, but you had to average out for the earlier months in the year. For an industry that's used to selling close to 18 million cars per year, this is certainly below average, but it's excellent considering the statewide shutdown, stay-at-home orders, and lingering feel of COVID-19. You got to remember a couple other numbers that nobody wants to talk about, and that's fleet numbers. If you take a look at the fleet numbers, they come in about 3.5 million out of that 17, 18 million number. Well, the rental car companies alone have ordered less. There's 1 million less vehicle ordered by them. So now you're down to 2.5, and probably another 500,000 more depending on the year over changeover before they place their orders for the spring. So those fleet numbers can be cut in half, which means a lot of that retail, a lot of those numbers we have on the SAR are retail numbers. Might not be as bad as you expect it to be. We expect retail demand to continue to recover, you know, for the rest of the year. Consumers, a lot of them took lease extensions back in March, April, and May. You know, they expect to return to the new car market. And it should be a positive boost to us because that's, you know, lease customers, one of our better customers. The other things that will help the industry include, you know, let's think about this, lower interest rates. And we've already told by the Fed for, you know, it's going to be like that for another couple of years. That improves consumer confidence. I'm going to talk about that later. You know, however, weekly jobless claims remain elevated compared to pre-pandemic peaks. There's also lingering uncertainty surrounding the passage of additional government stimulus bill. We saw how that was used as a political stick here before the election. They just kept beating that thing around. But what does that mean for us at the NADA? We have 177 people at the NADA, and they've been working hard. They've been working out of their offices at home. And just like the state ATAEs across our automotive trade executives, they've been working out of their home and they've been working hard too. Because it doesn't slow down. The automotive industry keeps this world moving. 71% of the tonnage of products shipped across the United States are shipped by the trucks, the ATDs, American Truck Dealers, in which the NADA represents. Think about that for a minute. Next time you go to your refrigerator and 7 out of the 10 items aren't in your refrigerator, you're living in Cuba. You're living in a third world country. It's because of our transportation sector that makes this country so strong and so great. We still got a lot of work to do. We still got to continue working with our members and supporting them. And we need to take away some good lessons, some really good lessons we learned. And myself as a dealer, as the head of the NADA, here's a few that I thought about. You know, every time we got to a challenge, there's an opportunity. You've heard this, don't miss an opportunity during chaos. When we fight to overcome the most extreme challenges like we did this year, our businesses get better and our businesses advance. And there'll be hopefully more lean and mean in the future. Two, more than ever, I think we need to educate ourselves and learn best practices no matter what industry you're in. You know, everybody's afraid of change, and change is the norm from now on. And third, most importantly, if many of you have had a chance to hear me speak before, you got to be positive. You know, the glass is, you know, you can't look at it as a half empty. We're in an industry right now, the automotive industry, you know, that has endured this, and the dealers have liquidity. In fact, many of the dealers that decide to sell their dealerships currently are getting, you know, multiples that they saw pre-pandemic. So all these things rolled into one. You know, I've always said the NADA, you know, we're a bulletproof band of brothers and sisters. We've been around for over 100 years. And I'll tell you, when the NADA tells you we got this, we do got this, you know. So hopefully I painted kind of an important picture for you here of what is for dealers during this year, but that's like current and past. And I'm looking forward to questions about the future. And I'm happy to answer any questions you have. You can open them up. If many of you heard from me before, you know, I'm not afraid of any question. I think it's great. And it's also very time saving because you'll be more direct on what you want to hear. So with that, thank you very much again for inviting me in here. I'm an open book. Shoot away.
Thanks, Rhett. A lot of good information there, and I think I'm going to hit you with we got quite a bit of questions. So I'm going to hit you with one that I get. You know, it's been the three letters have been haunting me all year was PPP. There's been a lot of discussion on the liability protection legislation to protect the dealer from legal liability regarding somebody getting sick or issues, you know, related to COVID happening to your employees or customers. I think, you know, if somebody gets hurt, you know, gets injured or somewhere, you kind of know where it happened. With COVID, you may not know where it happened. So is NADA involved in that at all?
Absolutely. That was one of the very first things when this is way back in March and April. We've supplied a lot of white papers to the SBA. Also, you know, I take a look at, you know, this is going to be the new norm, right? So this isn't anything like we're going to try once and not do it anymore. I think it's going to be pretty typical. So I think each state has state laws and board tort liability, et cetera, Everybody's up to speed on it. As I said, we supplied a lot of white papers with a lot of education, and we need to educate dealers even more to make sure they understand to create their environment themselves, to protect your employees. That's, you know, that's first thing, protect your employees and create an environment you protect your customers. At first, as you remember, there was a shortage of a lot of these protection products, you know, whether it be a mask, a clear mask, or a standard mask, or even disinfectant. You couldn't go down to your Walmart and buy it. There was a run on disinfectant. We're all up to speed now, so there's no excuses, you know, and health departments across the United States have found a new power they had no idea they had. Think about that. Many of these states were shut down, not based upon the thoughts of your governor or mayor, but based upon the influence of the health department. So these things being said, dealers should protect their facilities, protect their people, and understand when it comes to this tort liability and other liability on it, keep your ears up, pay attention, document things, just like when your employees check in every day, make sure they're scanned, make sure that you record all these things. These best practices are out there right now, and stay on them. If you have any questions, go to nada.org on the Coronavirus Hub site, and we have all that information for you.
Oh, great. That's good. Great information. You know, I got next question is another PPP question, believe it or not. Is there anything that last week the SBA dropped a needs basis application for dealers? Is there anything that's coming that NAD is working on related to that needs basis application?
Well, that didn't necessarily come as a surprise to anyone, right?
Yeah. Right.
You know, I always said if you loan your in-law $20, you're probably not even going to ask what they're going to do with the $20. But if you loan $10,000 to your in-law, you'll probably want to know what your in-law is going to do with the money, won't you? You know, that's
Right.
pretty much what this PPP is now. You know, you can't look backwards in time and say, did we do the right thing or not? Hell yeah, the dealers did the right thing. And they had good advisors, they did it. We didn't know where this thing was going. Nobody
Absolutely.
knew where it was going. So way back when we had these provisions, we provided white papers and we've had meetings with the SBA and with the banking community to make sure they understood that, you know, this is the first time this has ever been done on this. And these dealers really needed that money to ensure the future of their business, to protect their employees and their customers. So I did read the language. The NADA has read the language, and it just came out, I believe. I think it was here in the last 48 hours or something. They're expecting a 10-day response and all those things. Hey, you have attorneys within your company, you have counselors, you have CPAs. Go through it. Just do it as honest as possible. And uncertainty, let me tell you something. We're not out of this thing. You know, so if you're questioning whether, you know, you did the right thing or not with your PPP, I almost assure you most of your dealers took it. Here's the second item you got to remember. I mentioned it earlier. 30% of the dealers across the United States sell 300 new cars or less. They're definitely under that 2 million marker on the PPP loan. Definitely
Right.
under that. So I think you're probably going to cover 40, maybe even 50% of the dealers in the United States are not going to be able to have this scrutiny like the bigger, like myself, the bigger dealers that took more than 2 million. So
Right.
with that, stay close. The NAD, we're fully aware, our regulatory staff is fully aware, and we're in constant communication. We kind of know how they're thinking, but right now, this latest one, we need to know how they're going to interpret it with our banking partners.
That's great advice. Similar advice we're giving our clients as well. You know, we're in the use Mitch McConnell's thing. We might be in the fourth inning of a 9-inning ball game, so you don't know where this is going yet. So.
We might be in the second inning, Sam.
Yeah,
We might be in the second inning. We don't know that, you know.
Right.
This thing reflashes back in the spring, and we don't get some sort of a virus check or some sort of a vaccine for it. We could go through next year. I'm definitely not a doomsdayer, because I'm positive people are going to buy these cars. They're buying them at record numbers, you know. So our industry will stay strong, but there's still uncertainty out there.
Absolutely. Well, we got a non-PPP question. One is, what are some of the effects you think are going to be post-pandemic that will stay with the car business? Things that we've learned by reading this question, things we learned from during this time that will be practices like the touchless service and a more online buying, that sort of thing. What kind of things do you think will stay with us post-pandemic?
Well, one of the most important thing is I belong to a 20 group too, and I also we keep the one thing that Patrick Manzi does. He's our chief economist. He's a PhD, and his staff, they do a great job vetting the facts. You know, because I guess we've learned in this presidential election, you know, what are the facts? You kind of go dig out and figure them out on your own. But we found out the facts is dealers are running at pretty much the same rate as far as they have before, but they're selling more cars per salesman. So I think salesperson. So I think what you're finding is that dealers have found that they don't need to overstaff to be able to sell automobiles. Second thing that came out of this is the manufacturers, the OEMs, are relearning how critical automobile dealers are to get them through these type of crises. Could you imagine Ford or General Motors, you know, going through this pandemic for 2 or 3 months and their customers out on the road not having an automobile to be serviced or taken care of so they can travel back and forth? It would have been cataclysmic. It would have been a problem. So the automobile dealers just kept everything rolling, kept our highways rolling, kept our production rolling, made our production open sooner than maybe some others could, and kept our essential workers moving, kept us safe at home, all those different things. So that was a very first thing. The OEMs relearned how important dealers were. And second of all, dealers realized that, you know, I can run a more efficient machine in the business here, you know, and maximize my margins and things like that, and without having to add extra people. You also looked at the manufacturers, took a harder look at their stair steps, because before they had these stair steps trying to drive these numbers up, and all they were doing is driving customer satisfaction down, you know, and it's also putting more pressure on the dealers to add people to get that one extra sale. All that did was create a calamity on the showroom floor, and it hurt the customer. So by them backing off, by the OEMs realizing that maybe that's not the best answer, maybe they need to do something else. We've seen that happen too. So on an OEM level and as a dealer level, efficiency, digitization, and also having actually approaching your marketing in a drastically different way. Dealers now, you look back 5 years ago, we're spending 60 to 70% of their money on television and print. Now they're spending 60, 70% on the digital world. So that's a whole new world, and dealers will realize they got to invest in it. Don't treat it like a second item. It's got to be treated as a primary item.
Thank you. Next question looks like it deals with when do you anticipate inventory levels and product kind of normalizing again? We see a lot of inventory that is down significantly for dealers. When do you expect that to kind of more normalize?
Well, I've had the opportunity to visit some assembly lines as a dealer. I have half a dozen makes. And when you see the assembly lines, it's amazing, how these vehicles get built. Logistically speaking, they're up to speed. The manufacturers here in the United States and abroad are up to speed. They found a way to get going because they don't make any money unless they're making vehicles. That's like if you're in an ice cream parlor and you don't have any ice cream, there's nothing else you can sell. So they're selling ice cream, right? So they got to make the ice cream. And I think it's amazing that and the new products are coming out with. There's going to be a plethora of fully electric and charged electric vehicles here in the next 3 years. I always said Tesla, and I've said it before, has been the only girl at the 8th grade dance, but there's a bus pulling up out front full of girls from the other school around the corner, and they're getting out and they're going to come into the dance. So it's going to be for people that are looking for electrified vehicles in the future. They're going to have just a great gamut of products to choose from all the manufacturers and be able to get it serviced by your local dealer. They don't have to wait to ship it like in Tesla's situation, ship it 200 miles away. They can just ship it right down the street to their dealer and let the dealer take care of it for them.
Well, it's kind of funny. Then one of the questions is on electrical vehicles. So I said, what do you see the timeline for more and more EVs to come out? Basically, what they're asking. Is it 12 months?
You're gonna see. Volkswagen went full. They went full electric, et cetera, et cetera. But the biggest thing is the batteries. There used to be about, I believe you can fact check me, 10 to 15 lithium producers in the country about 3-4 years ago, and now there's over 100 in the world. This electric vehicle is a worldwide initiative. It's just not like a U.S. initiative. In the U.S. back in the 60s, when they came out with the pony car, the Ford Mustang, that was for U.S. This electric vehicle is for the world. So you're going to see everybody, all the engineers across the globe, finding a way to electrify, partially electrify. But it means nothing, quite frankly, Sam.
Yeah.
Because if they're too expensive, people aren't going to buy them. You can't tell people when they walk in a restaurant, your waiter doesn't come up and say, this is what you're having. Your waiter comes up and says, here's your menu. What would you like to buy? And that's what a dealer is. We're the menu. They can come in and we'll have all those different vehicles in stock. But if they don't have the range and they don't have the affordability, it's going to be a slow transition. I think it's like 1.7% of the vehicles on the road now are electric. 1.7. They seem to think it'll get to 5% by 2025. A lot of these states are making boastful pushes that they're going to go to, 100% only electric sales. Well, let me tell you, look what happened. I mentioned Cuba earlier. Cuba's had an embargo on automobiles. People find a way to put a motor in a car and get around, and people will take a car that has 100,000 miles and they'll take it into a shop, spend $5,000, redo the motor and keep driving it. These cars are high quality anymore. I mean, they'll go for 200,000 miles without a problem. All the manufactured cars will, with little maintenance and obviously upkeep. So if that's the case, they're not going to get the fleet turnover you think you will on the highway, and you're not going to walk into someone's driveway and take their car away from them because it's not electric. That will not happen ever. So those type of things are going to have the effect. I think that the push will be battery production, more competition among the OEMs to bring all these different models in. People get accustomed to using them. So there's 16,000 charging stations. Maybe double that might make it more convenient for people, and also have charging stations people can put in their home that are faster, because right now the charging stations in homes are pretty slow. All those things said, it will happen. It's going to happen at the speed customers tell us they want it to go at. We're not going to tell them how to do it.
Great answer. I think definitely the cost containment and having infrastructure to support charging them, several factors go into that. I totally agree with you on that. Got a question here on has NADA been working have been working on anything related to the Consumer Protection Council or division?
The CFPB?
Yes,
yep.
CFPB.
Yeah, that's headed by Paul and Andy. The NADA is not short on attorneys. We have great personnel. I always call them black belts. We talked earlier about martial arts. And once you get to the black belt, there's a certain amount of respect you get because you paid your dues, right? You had to go through the steps. But our regulatory and staff is second to none. The CFPB. So Rich Cordray came out of Ohio. Rich Cordray was our treasurer in Franklin County. I've known Rich for a long time. When he's CFPB director, he came in there and he found a way to collect a lot of money from the banks. I think it was 900 million or 700 million or something for some of these financings for disparate impact that was never proven. It was never provided to be proven. It was some sort of an enigma that everyone's supposed to believe. But we found out through our regulatory and through our legislative, dealers are not part of this initiative. So we were separated from that. But you have to remember, there's another agency there in Capitol Hill called the FTC, Federal Trade Commission. Federal Trade Commission has 5 commissioners, and currently there's 3 Republicans, 2 Democrats, and they enforce laws. They make things. They just make the guidelines that we have to abide by. They made the buyer's guide that dealers use. This is what you got to do. There wasn't any kind of legislative discussion about it. What you got to do for that. And this latest disparate impact through the CFPB didn't work. Don't be surprised that the FTC, depending on how this election goes, decides to maybe take a harder look at that from their end, as far as, but they're going to have some sort of proof and evidence that it does exist. And so far, the NADA provides, I strongly suggest you get with your dealer body. I said this the other day, if I put you on chat right now and I ask all those out there in the listening world, how many of you don't have a life insurance policy? I wouldn't get one person on the chat box. And if I ask you this, if you were in a battle zone during a war, how many of you would not wear a bulletproof vest?
Yeah.
I would not see that chat box open up.
Right.
So how can you let a dealer go out there knowing this disparate impact issues out there? And the NADA offers for free, the Fair Credit Compliance Guide at nada.org that your dealer can use, like I have at our dealerships, delivering about 15,000 cars a year, that our customers don't even care about signing. They understand it, and it explains to them why we discounted the loan. And they understand that customers are taking delivery of the car. They're happy with that, why the discount happened. And the second thing is, why would you not have your clients use the voluntary protection product guidelines that the NADA supplied at nada.org? We do that too, which explains all the different voluntary protection products. Why? Because the ABA, the American Bar Association, has already christened it. They've already had a meeting with it, and they said, we think this is wonderful. I think this is great. This is a move in the right direction. We really understand this is something that we ordain. Why wouldn't you do that? So why would you not put on your bulletproof vest, and why would you not buy a will? Dealers that are not using this today are asking for it, because who knows where this world's going to go in the next 2-3 years when it comes to regulatory compliance, especially if we have a shift in our government. So with that being said, that is my answer about the CFPB. I think it's more than just the CFPB.
Okay, no, good answer, Ed. We got another question. Next question's on what do you see the dynamics of the used car market? You mentioned it was a roller coaster. What do you see in 2021 for the used car market?
Well, I went to Las Vegas and talked to David Copperfield, and here's what he told me. No. I mean, this roller coaster. Just keep your day supply 45 days. Just follow it. Keep it 45 days. The dealers get, I'm going to keep it. I think I'm going to ring the bell. I'm going to carry 90-day supply. They might be ringing the bell on the top of their head. Just keep a 45-day supply. Ride this market. It's a good market. People are buying cars. We've seen a shift from people buying more expensive used cars, we've seen that shift. That's been a pretty strong shift to the entry level, or should I say the basic transportation. That's kind of taken adjustment. But we have so many good tools out there with the JD Power and the guide and the Manheim guide and all these other tools out there. Dealers, shame on them if they can't keep their inventory in 45 days. Shame on them. Pretty easy to do, and it keeps them out of harm's way. So if the thing does shift, you're only 15 days away, and you won't get hurt on that. Dealers can adjust to that. We're resilient. But man, you get strung out there at 70, 80, 90-day supply of used cars, you're asking for it.
Absolutely.
I'm not a doomsdayer, by the way. I think the used car business will always be good. It's always going to be good. It always will be. The reason a lot of the public companies are opening up white paper used car operations, name them, Lithia, the big one. Anyhow, all the publics are doing it. They're going to a white paper, group ones, they're all going to a white paper used car operation, trying to take advantage of this used car 600,000 unit increase last year.
Wow. Definitely a strong market, a used car market. I think, another question on used car we got, I'm just kind of grouping them together a little bit, is how do you think the changes in the fleet business is going to affect the used car market?
Oh, I'm sorry if I neglected AutoNation. How could I forget them? Mike, what a great public company he runs. Mike runs a great public company in AutoNation. I don't know. I mean, that's a who knows how to answer that question, quite frankly. It's one thing you learn as a counselor and advisor, you only like to give advice on which you got a pretty concrete idea on how to answer it. But fleet companies, are they going to hang on to the vehicles, or are they going to dump them? Well, that's out of our control. Rental car companies right now, since they didn't order that 1 million vehicle, probably going to hang on to their vehicles longer and bring them in. The other fleet companies are based on business models, commercial business. And we've seen this. Companies are not, have their sales force in the field are cutting back their hours because of COVID, and they're cutting back the distances they're driving. They're cutting back the number of travel dates they're doing. So the fleet number kind of parallels the airline industry with that. We're probably quicker to react to it than the airline industry. But those fleet numbers, they're not going to turn them in unless they're worn out, and they're going to extend their leases in many cases. A lot of these bigger leasing companies are saying, hey, our salespeople haven't driven these vehicles for 9 months. I had a 3-year lease. I got 8,000 miles on it. I got a 40,000 mile thing. Can I just extend the lease on this? So you're going to find that consumers are going to enjoy this competition between new cars and used cars as soon as that supply and demand meets up. And then after that, it's now a seller's market. It will turn into a buyer's market.
Good answer. I don't know how has the pandemic changed banking relationships, i.e. floor plan and customer financing?
Great question. Excellent question. Our partners at our bank and financing sources, those members of the American Financial Services, some of your bigger Bank of America, a lot of your captives at Ford and Toyota, Honda, and all the rest of them, they've been peachy. They understand the issues. They understand the issues we're going through. They understand that, that how important dealers are to making this whole thing work, and they got to make loans. And there's a lot of money in the market, especially cheap money. So they're able to, a lot of them perform very, very well. If you look at the profit picture on many of these financial businesses, Ford Credit just reported theirs, making billions, $1.8 billion, I think. I mean, you can manage that business well. Our family is in the subprime financing business, so I have a little better feel for it than a typical dealer. When you source a loan and you loan it out, you're a little bit more hypersensitive to what's going on. But it's a good market, and it's a good financing market, and you're going to see it continue to be a good financing market because of competition and the appetite for cars from customers.
A great question, especially with the low interest rates too. I think, like you said, there's a lot of cheap money in the system right now.
Yeah, and if a dealer's out of trust, the dealer's out of trust on their floor plan, right? I mean, if you're out of trust on your new car inventory today, that's your own fault, because cars are flying off the lots. There's a shortage of pickup trucks. There's a shortage of all makes and models of cars out there. So I mean, shame on you. That has nothing to do with the business environment. And quite frankly, I know one thing's for sure. Banks do not like to have the keys back for a car dealership. That's not something they enjoy having.
No, they're not
They're
doing
going to do anything they can other than get the keys back on that one. Yeah.
right. Now we always tell people to work with those people, and they seem to work with you, like you said.
Yeah, they're peaches right now. The banking industry is going above and beyond. They have gone above and beyond making things work for the dealers and the customers. Actually, the customers and the dealers first.
Going back to stimulus, I said, what has NADA been what has NADA been working on with the second stimulus package? Have they been involved?
Way back in March and April, we always got the dealer's interest best in mind. You know, we're trying to find how we can get deductions, how we can deduct all these things. You know, and we don't know everything yet, but you know, we've been working on it with them. You know, with white papers and small committee suggestions, et cetera, et cetera. And we have people, that's all they, you know, full time, that's what they do. So it's like, you know, we have to make sure the dealers' interests are kept in mind because we know liquidity is the name of the game. And dealers need to have that liquidity to be able to run their business. So yes, we're the first line of defense for the dealers, and we're there. Well, we're not going anywhere. We're right in front and center. They understand. And we're dealing with Capitol Hill. You have to understand, a lot of these agencies have nobody in the office. You know, we're dealing with people with virtual conferences, virtual discussions, one-on-one discussion, but that's the beauty of the NADA. You have to understand, for over 100 years, we've been doing this. So many of the relationships on Capitol Hill, as well as our state governments that we have, has been built upon the fact that we've been there the whole time. And we have legitimacy on Capitol Hill because we vet the facts and we talk about the truth. We don't spin things. We talk about the truth. And legislators have come to trust us because they know that we're going to give them the truth. And that's the hardest thing at times to be able to find. So those type of things are critical when you're looking at these PPP provisions and what effect is going to happen, because sometimes a legislator or a regulator doesn't understand, you know, the effects of something that were not anticipated. Yeah, but we anticipate those things because we understand our industry. So we're looked at more as for a lot of information, and for a lot of our advocacy is basically counseling with a lot of our legislators and regulators, because they understand the importance of the transportation industry, which the dealers are the center point of it in the distribution model in the country.
There's a follow-up here on PPP, and you may have answered it, I guess, but is NADA involved in trying the taxability of PPP forgiveness, the expenses being deductible?
Everything, all aspects of it, and it's a complicated little thing. And by the way, it's moved quite a bit. It's moved left, right, front, back. I mean, you talk about an ambiguous answer. I mean, we're just tracking this thing the whole time, because you got to understand, the SBA, this is new territory for them.
Yeah,
this is new territory. I think there's like 10 or 12,000 loans that they have that are over the $2 million threshold, and they're going to have to go out and they're going to audit them, and they're sending the paperwork out, and they're going to try to figure out how that is. But we understand what's important to dealerships. We understand liquidity. We understand tax deductions. We understand it's important for dealers to have a long-term answer. You know, we can't deal with stuff in 90-day windows. We got to deal with it. So hopefully this latest go round, as we sort them out. I don't know about many of your clients, but I know in our case, in Columbus, Ohio, our PPP bank provider doesn't even have the paperwork as of last week, didn't even have paperwork to be able to file any of these things. So, I mean, it's like, it's in real time, that's for sure. And I'm sure a lot of your clients are looking at you and saying, what's the answer? You know, you got to tell them I just talked to Ricart. Nobody's got the answer. We just got to work at it. All right. We're going to keep working on this thing. And I guess if you're truthful and you're honest and you realize for the last 9 months, you've had a chunk of money in your bank account so you can sleep at night, that's not a bad deal either. You know, that's not a bad deal either.
No, I see both sides of the taxability issue with the deduction, be able to deduct those expenses. I understand what Manoush is saying, but it's just I see both sides of that issue, and I think it's still going to be, I don't know what's going to, going forward, I don't know what's going to happen.
Well, I will assure you this, they're not going to take a look at your floor plan as some sort of a deduction. I mean, it's going to be real hard for them to do, because if you read the language on the provision, it talks about mortgage with mort, which means death, that actually has a definitive date time, right? A mortgage does. Floor plans don't. They're fluid. They go on forever. So, you know, there's a couple of things that got shook out early on that thing, but all the rest of them, you know, we leave those up to our staff and the CPAs and the attorneys that we have.
No, good answer. This one's kind of ambiguous too. It says, what would you say is the hottest thing that an NADA is working on right now?
Wow. The hottest thing we're working on. First of all, top of my head, well, we're working on PPP. That's first thing. Second thing is we're working on all of our virtual education for the dealers, because you got to remember, we had in-room classes. We all went virtual. We're also trying to graduate students out of our virtual academy, and went virtual, and then it went live, and then it went back to virtual. So we went through all that. We went through a choosing of our next CEO successor, Michael Stanton, from Peter Welch. That was pretty much a thing. And now we have the virtual meeting, the virtual NADA show, which is in February 9th to the 11th, to be able to provide the services and the products to dealers so they can do it virtually from their home safely because of PPP. Because you got to remember something. 70% of the vendors, 70% of the vendors at the NADA show in the last few years have been software providers, digital providers. That's a type of product you can do virtually for dealers to be able to access. No, I can't put a car lift on your screen, right, and have you ride on this lift. But those products, they can be demonstrated on the screen for our customers, and they can be able to shop that way. And many of our vendors look at the NADA show as their 13th month. This is a chance for them to see thousands of car dealers, thousands of dealers and other vendors in this country to be able to look at the products and services that they offer. And they look at that for the kickoff in the spring. Think about that, January, February, when the snow's flying in Ohio. You know, not necessarily Phoenix, obviously, or Florida, but right. This is their 13th month. So this thing is critical. We bring all the best software workshops for our dealers, all the different products and services such as yours, forefront for our dealer body so they can get their dealerships fit for the car year. And so that's another one of our priorities.
We'll take a couple more questions. I think we're getting close to the 11 o'clock hour. This one looks like it's dealing with, how do you see the OEMs and manufacturers' temperament during this pandemic, working with them, working with dealers?
I've attended many of the dealer attitude survey meetings. That's where we have surveys done of the dealer body through their NADA survey. We do one in the summer, one in the winter. These surveys have dozens and dozens of questions. There's a lot of consistency so we can compare past numbers with current numbers. And we have seen all the manufacturers. I can't think of one that hasn't been totally ingrained and in tune and listening as hard as I've ever seen. They are listening. Because let me tell you something, that's the dealers talking to you, and there's only one person that shakes the hand of today's customers in the automobile industry, and that's the dealer. They know what the temperament is of the consumer, you know, and customers now aren't going to buy just because you produced it. It was like that in the 70s. If Ford made a car or GM made a car, that's what that customer had to buy. Not anymore. Too many alternatives, too many powertrain alternatives, design alternatives, et cetera, et cetera. So these manufacturers realize our information off our dealer attitude survey. We have some of these manufacturers that have 40, 50 people on the call listening to the results of the dealer attitude survey. And they listen to what the dealers say about. We talk about the ineffectiveness of long-term ineffectiveness of stair steps for long-term customer retention. We talk about the recalls and how they're being handled, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it is so informative for the automobile dealers because the manufacturers, because they get to hear it holistically. You know, we have 60 to 70% of the dealers that fill this survey out. You talk about a random sample accuracy, that's off the charts. You couldn't ask for better information than that. You got people actually telling you. And we also have verbatims. Sometimes dealers like to write things in. We provide that for them. That dealer attitude survey, and by the way, the dealers know that there's no way the manufacturers know it was them that filled out the surveys because it's done by a third party, not by the NADA or the OEMs. It's done by a third party aggregator. And we don't even use zip codes or anything on these surveys. So that, I mean, they're anonymous, they're ghost-like. Nobody knows what they are. And dealers feel comfortable with that because they think about retribution. These dealer attitude surveys are the most effective way to be able to get with the OEMs and show them, and they are listening like they've never listened before.
It's good to know. How do you see the M&A activity has been really hot in the last couple of years? Do you see it staying at that level? The buy sells.
Well, they're strong, and they're going to remain strong. Do you know what the average age of the dealer in the United States is? The dealer principal,
60?
close to 70 years old.
Wow.
They're past retirement age of 65.
Wow.
The dealers like me that just had my 64th birthday yesterday, I don't plan on retiring either. This thing's too much fun. Who would want to walk out of this? Get to play with cars and meet customers and have great employees and meet the industry. We have the best people in the world in the automotive industry. You know, how would you like to be in some other industry? Like, I don't know, I can't even think of one. You know, dealers and our vendors like yourself and everything are some of the smartest, most ingenious people in the world. You know, I told everybody, I said, you know, there's millionaires all through the dealer body. You know, people have been very, very successful, and they're great to their communities. Nobody supplies to the community like the automobile dealers are. You take some of these manufacturers and want to go, you take Tesla, for example, they can't sniff at anything close to what the automobile dealers do across the United States for their communities. Yeah, they'll do a big donation so they get a big press out of it, but nobody's one-on-one solving their community issues like dealers do across the country, working with their local baseball team or their local church or their local school system. I mean, you know, Jeff Pohanka out of DC just sponsored a new cultural arts center for one. Build a cultural arts center for one of the schools over there. I mean, come on. Who else is going to do that? I mean, it's not, I think Mark Wahlberg, the TV star and movie star with Jay Feldman, the Chevrolet dealer out of Detroit, now in Columbus, Ohio. They donated like 5,000 laptops, or should I say iPads. So when this COVID initial hit, they gave them to all the children's hospitals in Detroit and Columbus and Edinburgh, so that kids can lay in bed since they can't have their family visit them. They can have that in front of them. Who else will do that? I can go on for 50 days talking about it. So that is the thing I'm most proud of about the automobile dealers, is their community support and our ability to project an image in our community, you know, that's unmatchable by anybody else. So when you see all this M&A going, you see all these acquisitions going on, in most cases, dealers are figuring now's the time to go. You know, I can get a good number for my dealership, and the buyers out there in private sector as well as public know how to run operations and be part of their communities, and they won't skip a beat.
No, I totally agree. Well, last question. It hurts me to even ask you this one. The reason I will is that we got several people asking, so I saved it for last. You probably know what it is.
No idea.
What's your thoughts on the election and the regulatory environment going forward, taxation? It sounds like it's still nothing's decided yet for most part, but do you have any thoughts on that? And I saved it for last because it's
well, no, this is easy. I'm just going to give you history, and history, it kind of explains where you're at and what you can expect, right? Historically, anytime there's been a balance of the Senate, House, and presidency, you know, in other words, one party doesn't control them all, it's been good for business. Think about it. Think about the business in the car business the last 8-10 years. You know, Democratic president, Democratic House, Republican Senate. You know, it keeps them in check. They really can't get anything done because they argue so much about everything. So, you know, which is good. If you happen to have one party and they'd blow everything through, you'd have 100 provisions every year, and it'd swing the wrong direction, no matter which direction you consider the right direction, you know? So that in itself. You also have to remember that in the last 4 years, the administration's had the ability to appoint 3 Supreme Court justices. And if you're conservative in nature, then you're probably pretty happy, because you know that you have conservative Supreme Court. That's something a lot of people don't, you know, you kind of look over that through all the hysteria of the election. But through history, I'll tell you, business has done well, actually done really well, when you have that balance of power and you have that ability of the Senate, the House, and the presidency to do it. There's going to be some issues with appointees, the things like, I will almost promise you, if Mr. Biden is elected president of the United States here, he will probably appoint a new CFPB director. Ms. Kraninger will not be there. that will raise up a whole bunch of other issues. You'll also have the ability to appoint some of these FTC commissioners when their terms are done. That'll raise some issues. He can also appoint the chair of the FTC, which also sets the agenda. But when it comes to the other things within our industry, you know, when it comes to NHTSA, Department of Transportation, things that really affect us. You'll talk about the banking and the tax issues. You know, if there's some sort of big heavy duty taxation program comes along, I can probably assure you that Mitch McConnell's probably not going to put a stamp on it real quick. You know, I mean, that's the reason this balance is so important, you know, and take a look at it holistically, other than taking a look at it that someone won or someone lost. The NADA takes pride in what we do. As I said, over 100 years, we come out and we're always doing the right thing for the dealer body. We're always doing the right thing for the industry. And we always have both sides of the aisle appreciate the fact that we're 100% truthful. We vet the facts. We give them counsel. And we're always going to have the best program for the dealers in the industry year after year after year. We work both sides of the aisle. I don't even like to say that. I like to take them down the aisle with us, you know, and that's what makes the NADA such a powerful organization on Capitol Hill.
No, I appreciate that. I agree with you. I think the balance of power is strong. I think we saw in the stock market, you know, yesterday and today, you know, kind of cheering that on. So I think that's going to be important. So, well, with that, we're at about the 11 o'clock hour. I really appreciate Rhett joining us, and I know we're really appreciative of taking his time out of his busy schedule and doing this for us this year. I want to thank everyone on here. We got dealers and people from all around the country on this webinar. And thank to Bolivia Blatt for co-sponsoring this with us. I look forward to next year, and hopefully we'll do this in person sometime again real soon. So thank you, everyone, and have a good day. Thank you.
Thanks, Sam. Keep your hands up. Keep your hands up.